Monday. 7:42 a.m. The sound of air brakes echoed across a quiet repair yard in the mountains of North Carolina. An 18-wheeler rolled through the gates of Caldwell Powertrain. The driver climbed down, tossed a folded delivery slip onto an old wooden workbench, and shrugged. CEO Marin Verra signed for it herself. He smirked. Said some backwoods mechanic could keep the trash. Then he pulled open the trailer doors. 6 enormous engine blocks sat inside. Dust-covered. Dented. Forgotten. Lined up like 6 coffins waiting to be buried. The driver climbed back into his truck and disappeared down the road. For a long moment. Nobody moved. Then Holt Caldwell walked forward. His boots echoed across the concrete floor. He stopped in front of the 3rd engine block. Slowly. He brushed years of dust away with the palm of his hand. A serial number emerged. His fingers froze. Not because he was angry. Not because he was insulted. Because he recognized it. 4 years earlier. He had assembled that exact engine with his own hands. And in 5 weeks. The woman who had thrown it away would wish she never had. Stay until the end. Because this story isn't about engines. It's about respect. Truth. And the cost of underestimating the wrong man. The truck disappeared at exactly 7:58. Silence settled over Caldwell Powertrain. Outside. Only the ticking sound of a cooling pickup engine broke the stillness. Holt walked from one block to another. He whispered every serial number. 0017. 0020. 0041. 0046. 0053. 0068. Each number unlocked another memory. Late nights. Prototype testing. Race weekends. Victories. Failures. Years of his life. Reduced to scrap metal. He closed the garage doors. Locked them. Then walked into the small office beside the shop. A little girl looked up from her book. 9-year-old Ren smiled. "Dad. Your hand's shaking again." He forced a smile. "I'm okay, sweetheart." But he wasn't. Not really. He opened the bottom drawer of an old steel desk. Inside sat a faded yellow folder. Its edges had curled with age. Inside were engineering drawings. Every page covered with handwritten notes. Every blueprint signed the same way. H. Caldwell. Chief Powertrain Engineer. Ren looked between the papers and her father. "Were these yours?" He nodded quietly. "A long time ago." She tilted her head. "You miss it?" He looked toward the closed shop doors. "I never stopped." The next morning. A charcoal Range Rover rolled into the parking lot. Marin Verra stepped out. 34. CEO of one of America's most respected performance engine companies. Tailored coat. Perfect posture. Leather portfolio tucked beneath one arm. She didn't knock. People usually knocked before entering someone else's shop. She didn't. She walked straight to Holt's workbench and placed a legal document beside him. "My attorneys need one additional waiver. Same terms. Sign here." Holt wiped grease from his hands. "Read every line." Twice. Marin watched impatiently. She had negotiated billion-dollar contracts. Watching a mechanic read legal language felt almost amusing. Finally she spoke. "Take your time. I'm sure this type of document isn't familiar." No response. Holt simply kept reading. Clause after clause. Word after word. When he finished. He quietly signed. No argument. No complaint. No negotiation. Exactly the opposite reaction Marin expected. She slid the paperwork back into her portfolio. As she turned toward the exit, her eyes wandered across the shop. Everything was spotless. Tools arranged with military precision. Engine stands cleaned after every use. Nothing looked abandoned. Then, a racing poster caught her attention. IMSA Championship 2014. Car number 17. Verra Motorsports. She paused. Just half a second. Then smiled to herself. Charming little place. Very rustic. The door closed behind her. Outside, the Range Rover disappeared down the mountain road. Inside, Holt stared toward the empty doorway. Then quietly spoke to himself. Are you sure you don't want engine number 3? He wasn't talking to her anymore. He was talking to fate. That night, after Ren had gone to sleep, Holt picked up an old flip phone. One contact remained untouched for 3 years. He pressed call. The line rang twice. Holt? It's me. A pause. I need you here. You have to see something. Nothing else. The next morning, at 6:15, a battered Ford pickup rolled into the yard. Del Mosby climbed out. Gray beard. Oil-stained boots. 22 years inside Verra Engineering. He stepped into the shop. Stopped. Looked at the engines. Walked directly to block number 3. He knelt beside it. Read the serial number. Closed his eyes. They actually threw them away. His voice cracked. Holt handed him the disposal contract. Del read every page. His jaw tightened. 4 years. They threw away 4 years of your life. Holt didn't answer. Del looked at him carefully. There are things you never knew. Holt finally looked up. Del continued. Wallace Verra personally chose you. He ignored the entire hiring committee. He said you were the only engineer alive who understood what a heritage engine was supposed to feel like. Silence. Then another truth. When your wife got sick, the board froze your severance. 93 days. They demanded you sign away every design you'd ever created. You refused. So they kept everything. Holt looked away. Del's voice grew quieter. Wallace never approved it. He was overseas. When he came home, he planned to fire Garrett Voss. But he suffered a stroke before he could. The room fell silent again. Del finally asked. So what now? Holt looked toward the 6 engines. I'm fixing them. Del frowned. Even after everything they did? They didn't betray me. People did. The engines deserve better. For the first time in years. Del smiled. What do you need? 8 weeks. And your hands. You've got both. That evening. 32 floors above Charlotte. Marin closed another exhausting board meeting. The office lights dimmed automatically. Her eyes drifted toward an old photograph sitting on a shelf. Her father. Wallace Verra. Smiling. Standing beside an engineer wearing safety glasses and a white lab coat. The man's face was hidden beneath a hard hat. She had passed that picture every day for years. She had never asked. Who was standing beside her father? She turned off the lights. And went home. Back in Asheville. Ren walked carefully into the garage carrying 2 steaming mugs. One for her dad. One for Del. She handed Dell the cocoa. He crouched beside her. Do you know your dad used to build championship engines? Ren blinked. He did? Dell smiled. He's the only person alive who knows how to save these. Ren looked toward Holt. Then back at Dell. I'll keep bringing him cocoa every night. So he doesn't get tired. Dell laughed. The first genuine laugh he'd had in months. Across the shop. Holt quietly watched them. For the first time in years. He didn't feel alone. By the end of the first week. The first engine had already been stripped apart. The second sat on a machining table. Every night stretched past midnight. Every morning began before sunrise. Then Marin called again. Another signature. Another waiver. This time. A coffee shop in downtown Asheville. Neutral ground. At exactly 10 o'clock. The cafe buzzed with conversations. Students. Tourists. Business professionals. Marin sat in the center. Exactly where everyone could see her. 3 corporate lawyers surrounded her. Leather portfolios stacked neatly across the table. 4 expensive cappuccinos waited untouched. An empty chair remained on the opposite side. 5 minutes later. The bell above the entrance rang. Holt walked in. Same boots. Same flannel shirt. Same grease stain on one sleeve. Marin noticed immediately. So did everyone else. She smiled politely. Then spoke loud enough for half the cafe to hear. Mr. Caldwell. Perhaps next time. You could wash your shirt before meeting my legal team. Unless mountain mechanics don't distinguish between a repair shop and a boardroom. One young attorney laughed. A sharp, embarrassing laugh. The room grew quiet. Even the barista stopped steaming milk. Everyone waited. Would the mechanic lose his temper? Would he defend himself? Holt simply walked forward. Sat down. Opened the contract. Read every page. Every clause. Every signature line. Without saying one unnecessary word. Finally. He signed. Closed the folder. Pushed it back across the table. Then looked directly into Marin's eyes. Calm. Steady. Almost gentle. Are you absolutely certain? You don't want engine number 3? Her smile vanished. For one strange second. The cafe disappeared. Something inside her tightened. She had never mentioned engine number 3. Not once. Only Garrett Voss had handled those records. So. How did this mechanic know? Holt stood. Picked up his newspaper. Nodded politely to the lawyers. Then walked away without another word. The cafe remained silent long after he left. Marin stared at the untouched coffee. Cold. Forgotten. For the first time. She wasn't thinking about contracts. She wasn't thinking about business. She was thinking about one impossible question. Who exactly was Holt Caldwell? Marin couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same man. A mechanic in a faded flannel shirt. Calm. Unshaken. Completely untouched by her insults. And one sentence echoed louder than anything else. Are you sure you don't want engine number 3? How did he know? She had never looked at the serial numbers herself. Garrett Voss had handled the disposal paperwork. He had selected the contractor. He had approved the shipping order. Only a handful of people even knew which engine was number 3. The next morning, Marin locked herself inside her office. She requested every document connected to the VP7 Heritage program. Hundreds of pages arrived. Purchase orders. Engineering reports. Internal memos. Old contracts. She read until sunset. Then she found it. Buried inside her father's final estate documents. One sentence. One forgotten clause. The VP-7 Heritage engines shall never be destroyed or transferred without the written approval of the original chief powertrain engineer. Marin read it again. Then a third time. The words refused to leave her mind. Original chief powertrain engineer. Who was that? Why had nobody ever mentioned him? And why did Gerrit Voss never bring up this clause? For the first time since becoming CEO, she realized something terrifying. She didn't know her own company nearly as well as she believed. 2 days later, Marin drove back to Caldwell Powertrain. No lawyers. No assistants. No security. Just questions. She stepped into the garage. Del Mosby was sorting valve springs across a workbench. She recognized him immediately. He had worked beside her father for over 2 decades. Mr. Mosby? Del looked up. A brief glance passed between him and Holt. Almost invisible. Then Del answered. I'm helping an old friend. Marin turned toward Holt. Engine number 3 no longer looked abandoned. Its cylinders gleamed. Fresh oil coated every surface. Every bolt rested in perfect order. It looked alive again. She studied Holt for several seconds. Finally, she asked, "Who are you?" Holt kept measuring a crankshaft. Didn't even look up. "I'm a mechanic." "No. You aren't." Mechanics don't have former senior engineers driving across the state to work for free. Silence. She waited. Holt didn't answer. Not because he couldn't. Because he believed the truth was something she had to discover herself. Marin left more confused than ever. But this time, she didn't feel angry. She felt curious. And curiosity is often the beginning of truth. That night, Marin pulled an old framed photograph from her office shelf. It showed her father standing proudly beside an engineer. For years, she had never paid attention to the second man. Now, she looked closely. The face remained hidden beneath a hard hat. But one detail stood out. A wedding band. And a small scar across the right knuckle. She froze. She had seen that scar. Only days earlier. Wrapped around a pen inside a coffee shop. The engineer beside her father was Holt Caldwell. Her heart skipped. Everything suddenly felt different. Over the next 2 weeks, Marin returned to the shop again. And again. She stopped announcing herself. Sometimes she simply sat quietly in the office. Other days she brought a book. Nobody asked why. One afternoon, Ren came home from school. She noticed Marin immediately. "You came back." Marin smiled softly. "I did." Ren held up a children's book about engines. "Want me to teach you?" Marin almost laughed. A billionaire CEO. Being taught combustion by a 9-year-old. Okay. For nearly an hour. Ren explained intake. Compression. Combustion. Exhaust. With complete confidence. Marin found herself laughing. A real laugh. The first one since her father's funeral. Across the garage. Holt kept working. But he accidentally polished the same camshaft 3 times. Del noticed. He smiled. He didn't say a word. The next morning, Marin drove straight to Del's house. She asked one question. Who was the original chief powertrain engineer? Dell stared at her quietly. Then answered. You've already met him. Nothing more. The drive back to Asheville felt longer than ever. That Friday, Garrett Voss walked into her office carrying a thin folder. We're ready. Marin frowned. Ready for what? To sue Holt Caldwell. He laid several photographs on her desk. Old engineering records. Race programs. Technical documents. One picture showed Holt standing beside Wallace Verra. Garrett smiled. The moment he finishes restoring those engines. We take everything. Marin looked up slowly. You knew? Of course. You knew exactly who he was. Garrett didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everything suddenly made sense. He had chosen Holt to receive the engines. He expected Holt to violate an old non-compete agreement. Then he planned to seize everything. It wasn't disposal. It was a trap. Marin quietly closed the folder. Thank you, Garrett. I'll handle it. The moment he left, she locked the folder inside her desk. For the first time, she didn't trust the man sitting closest to power. A few days later, Marin arrived at Holt's shop carrying a small wooden box. My father kept this locked in his private safe. I've never opened it. I think we're supposed to do it together. Holt slowly released the brass latch. Inside, 3 items waited. A handwritten letter. A sealed legal envelope. And a USB drive. Marin unfolded the letter. Her father's handwriting filled every page. The room grew silent as she read aloud. Wallace Verra had secretly uncovered a massive fraud. For years, Garrett Voss had stolen millions through fake disposal contracts. Prototype engines weren't destroyed. They were secretly sold overseas through shell companies. Wallace planned to fire him. He also planned to bring Holt back. Restore every dollar of his unpaid severance. Return him to his rightful position. 3 weeks later, Wallace died before he could act. Marin's voice cracked. She opened the sealed envelope. Inside, a notarized legal document. It named Holt Caldwell, Permanent Heritage Engineering Trustee, and granted him 12% ownership of the company. She looked at him in disbelief. I sold 6 priceless engines to you for $4,000. I called you a backwoods mechanic. I was wrong. Holt looked at her gently. You weren't wrong. You were lied to. There is a difference. Marin lowered her head. For the first time, she truly understood. Week 5. The first engine sat mounted on Holt's dyno. Fresh oil. Fresh fuel. Fresh hope. Dell monitored the computers. Wren wore oversized hearing protection. Marin stood beside Holt. You should start it. She blinked. Me? My father always believed the first ignition belonged to someone carrying the future. Her fingers trembled. She turned the key. The starter spun. Once. Twice. Then, the engine exploded to life. A deep, perfect thunder filled the room. The gauges climbed. Horsepower rose. Temperature remained flawless. 612 horsepower. Better than factory specification. Dell laughed. I knew you'd improve it. Holt smiled quietly. I've had 8 years to think about it. Marin stared through the observation glass. Tears filled her eyes. She had almost thrown history into a scrapyard. Instead, she was witnessing a masterpiece reborn. Minutes later, Marin stepped outside. She made one phone call. Within 48 hours, a private collector agreed to purchase all 6 restored engines. $3 million. Verified. Paid immediately. But Holt refused a commission. They belong to your father's company. They always did. That single sentence told Marin everything she needed to know about the man standing beside her. The following Monday, Gerrit Voss arrived smiling. He believed victory was close. Instead, Marin slid a thick folder across her desk. Bank records. Wire transfers. Fake contracts. Offshore accounts. Every crime carefully documented. Gerrit's smile disappeared. Security escorted him from the building before lunch. Federal investigators arrived that afternoon. His empire collapsed in a single day. 3 days later, the board gathered. 9 directors. 1 decision. Marin presented every piece of evidence. She explained the fraud. The stolen millions. The hidden contracts. Then, she invited Holt Caldwell to stand beside her. This, she said proudly, is the original chief powertrain engineer my father trusted. The man our company abandoned. The man who still chose to save us. Silence filled the room. One elderly director slowly stood. Then another. Soon, every board member rose to their feet. Not because they were told to. Because respect demanded it. The vote was unanimous. The VP-7 program returned. Holt regained his title. His withheld severance was repaid. With years of interest. Justice had taken a long time. But it finally arrived. Months later. Daytona International Speedway. The rebuilt VP-7 engine screamed down the front straight. Car number 17 crossed the finish line first. Victory. Again. Ran threw her arms around her father. Then reached for Marin. Without thinking. The 3 of them stood together. Not because contracts said they should. Because life had quietly brought them there. That evening, they stood overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. The waves rolled endlessly toward shore. Marin smiled. I once paid you $4,000 to haul away 6 engines. Holt looked out across the water. It was never about the engines. She turned toward him. What was it about? He smiled. The right moment. Sometimes. Life is like an engine. Everything depends on timing. Not too early. Not too late. Just when you're finally ready. Because the greatest opportunities often arrive disguised as worthless scraps. And the greatest people are often the ones the world overlooks. If this story moved you, remember this. Never judge someone's worth by their clothes, their job title, or where they work. The quietest person in the room may be carrying the greatest legacy. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment with your favorite moment, and share it with someone who still believes kindness and integrity always find their way home.